Welcome to Doxa Deo Christian Church, Rains Park. We are unashamed about the gospel of Jesus Christ, as we recognise it to be the power of God to the salvation of all men. Today's message was brought to you by Francois du Toit. We trust that this message will impart life and be a blessing to you.
So wonderful that Paul says it's from faith to faith. And we thought, the other way around, we thought it's our little faith, like a little snakes and ladders game. I've just got to gain more faith and increase my faith. But it's his faith. He's the author. And in being the architect of our design, he designed us very specifically to not discover our life within a horizon, a realm that would reduce us to flesh. But we're designed to live by the fullness of the expression of God's thought, the word that proceeds from his mouth. Not second-hand, not diluted through years of interpretation and doctrine and experience, but from the eye of the fountain, the word that proceeds from his mouth in Isaiah 55, cancelled distance, cancelled the drought, cancelled the disaster that Adam left us with. And that word did not return to him void. That word prospered in his purpose to redeem his image and his likeness in you. Jesus did not come with any other agenda to planet Earth, not even to start the Christian calendar. Thank God for a great calendar that celebrates the fact that 10 years ago God divided human history between a before and after. But he came exclusively to unveil what man has forgotten. We've forgotten the rock that begot us, the father that gave birth to us. We adopted a foreign father, like carrying a virus that finds expression in your person. And he came to redeem that. The original blueprint, the original image, the original value, the original likeness unveiled again. Lydia and I, for a few years, operated a safari lodge in the Sabi Sands Game Reserve in Mpumalanga area, bordering the Kruger National Park. And we did hiking safaris there, and we had an awesome time for a couple of years taking visitors into this unique African wilderness area. And it was always such an excitement to get a new group, from overseas especially, and knowing that they have prepared themselves with an expectation to come to that specific address in Africa, to enjoy what they've only witnessed in the brochures, the glossy brochures on TV, and they've seen these images, and now suddenly they arrive in the real Africa. And the joy as a guide was to point them in the right direction. And often, because our eyes are trained, in that context, we would see something that they didn't see, and we'd stop, and while they're looking around, we just point them in the right direction. And then you watch their faces, turning from frown and, shivering hands, got the camera ready and the binocs, and what do I use first? And they just don't see it, and they just don't see it. And suddenly, you don't have to explain. You just see their faces exploding. And immediately, they want to include the rest. Maybe the wife is still looking in the wrong direction. Is it there? So that they can see for themselves. For a few years, when I first came to Hermanus, it's about 120 kilometers south of Cape Town, we started whale watching safaris. We take people out by boat. Same thing. A while ago, we had a group of men from the peninsula that just came down for the weekend in Hermanus. And I remember the Saturday morning. It was just one of those perfect mornings. And it was in whale season, and we went to one of the lookout rocks. Hermanus is just absolutely incredible for land-based whale watching, even though we did the boat-based whale watching as well. But we sat there on the rocks, and the whales were breaching. They were displaying, full on. You couldn't have it better. And I began to share with the folk, the joy we've had in our lives as in the tourism industry, the privilege we felt to fulfill someone's expectation, to fulfill their dream, to point them to what they've anticipated to see. But that place was so restricted to a certain booked schedule. And depending on their megapixel camera, they could capture capture brilliant little moments that would relate them to that experience, fill in their journals and to try and add weight to the memory. And how these memories would come and go. And the joy now to be a guide, no longer pointing someone to a geographical address in Jerusalem, but a greater, far more permanent reality, a union that took place. He says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. The impression that he left was so much more than something I could write a book about, something I could ponder for the rest of my life. But it's an intimate encounter. The heart of God, the dream of God realized in you. You don't have to travel somewhere geographic to have more of Him. Because Emmanuel means God with us. And He's not more Emmanuel to the Jew than what He is to the Japanese. Not more Jerusalem than Johannesburg. Because He took the initiative and He cancelled every possible definition of distance. Love hates distance. Love desires embrace. And so God paid a price for our innocence. As much as Jesus redeemed our original worth, His original ownership, our original identity, He redeemed our innocence. Because how wonderful it would be to discover that, hey, I'm not an ugly duckling, I'm a swan. But I'm a guilty swan. He's embraced you. Because He's jealous for you to know a life free from a sin consciousness. So He paid the highest price to redeem your innocence. And what we're celebrating in our fellowship, koinonia, has a reference to our innocence. He cancelled every possible thing that could interfere with this celebration. Imagine the prodigal returning home, not to a critical brother, but to the loving embrace of a father who's waited for that moment to celebrate. And in the course of the evening, music's going, dancing, the braaivleisvuure, barbecues are going, an atmosphere of enormous celebration. We're not talking about the other brother now, we're just trying to concentrate on the party. And suddenly, the prodigal catches his father's eye and he detects a little frown on the forehead of his father. End of the party. And for so long we've preached a mixed message. Almost like these special mobile phone offers, you know. You get it for this discounted value. And the print is like massive. This is the price. You cannot believe it. And before reading the fine print, you do it. And then the fine print hits you. And it's Moses all over again. Paul says a little bit of leaven spoils the whole dough. And when we discover His embrace and the integrity of His initiative, we just love Him back. Because He loved us first. He established His delight in you. So He's celebrating the treasure of great value. Every high place, says Isaiah 40. And that word every is every in every language. Every high place. You see, God's not about to redeem you 50%. And He'll need an eternity to try and sort out your holiness. Justified by faith, but sanctified by works. If that was true, we need to pray for a long life. God had a redemption in mind that was so perfect that it would not even briefly interrupt His Sabbath. Because his Sabbath was not a rest, because he felt exhausted. Even God, creating the universe, that's big business. And after 6 days, God deserved a break. He doesn't tire. Your crisis cannot exhaust him. He celebrates that moment of the artist putting the brush down. Perfect. Behold, it is very good. So God's rest is not at risk. His rest is not interfered with through Adam's fall. His rest is not something fragile. Don't disturb me now. I just want to ponder this moment. His rest is secure because of a perfect redemption. Redemption's perfection can only be measured and justified in the context of what God saw, the original thought of man in my image, consistent with my likeness, redeemed. So it involves history to celebrate the Sabbath prophetically in its shadow, display window context. And he says, on the seventh day, you shall do no work. Why? Because I prophetically celebrate my perfect work. You cannot add with your labor to perfection. Imagine that Van Gogh painting that Andre was referring to. And you've got a rich great-grand-uncle who bought it for you. Or for a previous generation, you've inherited it. And one day you wake up with a sense of inspiration. And you buy your drum of PVA, whatever you call it here. Discounted value paint, but that's the color I always wanted. And you add your little touch to that canvas. What have you just done? You have destroyed its original value. God says, hands off. On the seventh day, I want you prophetically to shadow the perfect work, measured by the greatness of his stature. When Moses sings the song in Deuteronomy 32, he says, ascribe greatness to our God, the rock. How could I possibly measure the greatness of God outside of the context of the fact that his work is perfect? What an insult it would be to find fault, to find a flaw in your understanding of his perfect work, of what he redeemed. You've forgotten, says that same chapter in verse 18, the rock that begot you. And we've come twisted and out of our true pattern, crooked and perverse. But the beacon of light did not arrive on planet Earth, this light. The people who dwelt in darkness saw the true light that enlightens every man has come. Not to condemn, not to ridicule, not to put shame on the human race, but to redeem the perfection of God's image and his likeness in you. Jesus has come to give definition to you, to reintroduce us to ourselves again. Simon, son of Jonah, now that you know who I am, let me introduce you to you. Jonah could never define you. Paul says he separated me from my mother's womb. Whatever was so important to me, my noble link with Benjamin, great-great-granddad Benjamin, he separated me from it by revealing his son in me. You see, our reference now is not a beautiful Sabi Sand game reserve experience for 2 or 3 nights. A wonderful whale-watching safari in Hermanus in Walker Bay. It's not even Christ in history. Neither is it Christ in the unknown, distant, far future. But it's Christ in you, the hope of glory. This world is absolutely hopeless gloryless without the revelation of Christ in you. And that's what what he has come to unveil. He says in Matthew 13:44, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure in an agricultural field. Would you agree with me that there's more to this field than what meets the eye then? The Greek word agri, the Afrikaans has it correct, says, skat in die saailand. When I flew from Germany to the UK, we had patches of no cloud. And what struck me was the fact that in Europe, you have every square inch cultivated. I mean, in Germany, we're going by train from one city to another, and I was surprised to see these vineyards. I mean, into the mountains. You better don't taste that wine when you do some harvesting there, because it's deadly steep. Every square inch cultivated. But in agricultural context, land has a specific value. And the value is measured by what kind of harvest, what kind of return can I expect. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in an agricultural field. Maybe for generations, we've harvested that field in the context of a very surface value. Very fragile. Because you'd have your years where the rain would just be absent. And the seasons would be different. And you feel so threatened because my harvest is about to disappoint me. And then Jesus walks through the field and he says, you say, there are yet 4 months. Then comes the harvest. I say, lift up your eyes. I want to give you a new reference. Because the harvest you're waiting for equals your daily bread. And you're not designed to live by bread alone. I want to show you a harvest that you're designed for. And you know what? It is already ripe. When is the harvest ripe? Only once the seed in the ear matches the seed that was sown. And he did it in 3 days. The verse continues to say, this treasure in the field, a man discovers. And he hides it again. And he goes away. And in joy, he's not about to buy a bargain. He could. He could go and try and discount the value because let's just buy the piece of agricultural land. But he's buying the treasure. And the integrity of God, he pays the highest price for the redemption of the human race. He sells all that he has and buys the field. He buys the field. Now Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4:7, we have this treasure in earthen vessels. And for how long we've lived within the reduced value of the cosmetic value or practical purpose of the earthen vessel and missed its true content because of the blindfold. The God of this world blindfolding the minds of the unbelievers. And the word unbelief simply implies that I'm not seeing what God is saying. I'm not agreeing with God about me. To keep them from seeing the light of the gospel, which is the glory of God revealed in the face of a man as in a mirror. He is the image of God. He makes the invisible God visible. And that's what Jesus came to redeem. He redeemed the visible reality of my true value. And so we're declaring that. And God is declaring that through living epistles. Not us trying to upgrade ourselves through behavioral modification programs to add value to my life and to my career, but simply discovering what He unveiled as in a mirror. You see, the whole Old Testament context was a shadow. But in Christ, the veil is removed. That which was hidden for ages and generations, which none of the rulers of this world understood, He now unveiled as in a mirror. The days of window shopping are forever over. God can never again be reduced to an invisible God. Because Jesus is the image of the invisible God. And in Christ, God displays you. Jesus did not come as an example for us. He came as an example of us. If he came as an example for us, he would have immediate competition with Buddha, Moses, Muhammad, and the rest. He didn't come to win a few desperate votes for the Christian faith. Don't vote for Buddha, vote for me. Walk around with it. He came to unveil you. Doesn't matter what disguise you live in. He came to unveil you. And in that unveiling, there's a mirror impact. There's a resonance that takes you beyond reason. Paul says we impart this in words not taught by human wisdom, not reduced to your intellectual capacity. We're not aiming for the head, we're aiming for the heart. He says we teach it by the Spirit, combining Spirit with Spirit. You see, because we are the God kind by design. Have you noticed that Jesus calls the devil the father of lies? So he's a foreign father. He did not invent one of the cells in your body. Because we are the God kind, we are God compatible, faith compatible. Otherwise, God would be wasting his words on humanity. But humanity is his audience because humanity is his total concern. God's total portion is in you. Because he sold all that he had to buy what belonged to him in the first place. To redeem. Not to persuade him, but to persuade you that Adam's fall did not cancel your original design. The lost coin never lost its original value. And the word lost in Luke 4:15, lost sheep, lost coin, lost son, implies original ownership. He came to his own, and even though his own did not recognize him, felt totally indifferent to God, their indifference did not cancel God's faithfulness. I thank God for a beautiful gospel. You see what this word does? It draws you into a place of knowing his embrace. We don't have to fake nothing. You just enjoy him because he's enjoying you. He makes it so easy for you. You don't have to pray through, fast through some. You don't have to do wilderness. Because the whole of Israel got lost in the wilderness because they believed a lie about themselves. We're grasshoppers. What an insult to the image and the likeness of God. No wonder they were so neutralized that they had no impact upon the nations. But I thank God for the resurrection. Paul preaches the resurrection in Acts 13 and he quotes Psalm 2. Today I have begotten you. And haven't you wondered about the next line in that same psalm? He says, ask of me. No, not your daily bread. There's a new menu. The nations. Why the nations? Because when I understand the resurrection of Christ, I realize the revelation that he was not raised alone. That we, while we were still dead in our trespasses and sins, were raised together with him. Ascended together with him. Co-crucified, co-raised, co-ascended, co-revealed. So that the living epistle now appeals to every man's conscience. Because there's an unveiling, Paul says, we commend ourselves to every man's conscience. And the word conscience is the Greek word suneido, which is the opposite of hades. Hades means not to see. Suneido means to see together. Do you remember that moment? When I'm pointing to my guests, there's a leopard. You just can't see it. But the fact, or that brief moment that they don't see the leopard's still there. Suddenly they see it. And his gifts were that what his gift reveals becomes your reality. Not another beautiful Sunday morning's message that I file in my library, but a place of encounter. He leads us to a place of encounter. I often wonder why Jesus missed a golden moment for an altar call. You remember the two men on the way from Emmaus? Frowns on their forehead, communicating their disappointment. Their political agenda didn't quite work out the way they thought it would. This was his great moment to become at least the king of the Jews. Kick the Sanhedrin where it mattered most. And he goes and dies on them. And he joins the conversation. And later on, when they reflect on the conversation, they say, did not our hearts burn within us? While he talked to us on the way, and he opened the scriptures, and suddenly the prophetic word fell into place. And then Luke, interviewing these two gentlemen, takes much trouble to get to the point where he's unveiled to them. So Luke would prompt them in his interview. I don't want you to leave out the detail here. And so Luke writes in chapter 24, when they got to the house, it appeared that he was going further. You think, oh my Lord, what a wonderful opportunity to bring closure to the conversation. Sign on the dotted line. Make a decision for Jesus. Say the sinner's prayer. Because if they did, it would have been a unique opportunity for us to copy a sinner's prayer, because there's none of them in the Bible. This is our moment for the altar call while the organ softly plays. It appeared that he was going further. Not even Rabbi Jesus can take you beyond that point until you constrain him. And they constrained him. They said, Lord, stay with us. Come and tabernacle. We want to capture more than a beautiful conversation. And he went into the house and stayed with them. And at their next meal, they saw him. And he vanished from their sight. And what happened to them? They were mobilized. They ran off, odd hour of the night to do things like that. Ran off to Jerusalem to tell the others. One of the weakest programs the church can ever engage in is to try and motivate people with sense of duty, sense of guilt to evangelize. My son and I traveled back from Potchefstroom a while ago. I was ministering there at the campus, and we did a conference in the Potchefstroom area. And the youth pastor of the specific campus accompanied us to the airport. And we had a lovely time of conversation. The youth pastor just spoke of his concern and his desire to motivate the people. You just kind of crank them up into go for Jesus mode. And my son doesn't say much, but when he says something, I just want to write it down. So he just said, he says a couple of months ago, some of his friends and him went down to the Transkei coast, and they camped there for the weekend. And they had a blast of a weekend. He says, and what struck him was after the weekend, on their way back to Johannesburg, the conversation was not who took the nicest, cutest photograph, who collected the prettiest shell. But it was, hey, who can we bring back, can bring with us next time? Who can we include next time? The moment we enjoy, we encounter, our immediate desire is to include, to embrace. What we have belongs to the neighborhood. Living epistles, known and read by all men. So if people run from you, it's not the living epistle speaking. It's some conglomeration called religion. Most disgusting. The Christ life, the dominant influence in society, the kingdom of God within you, is the most irresistible, attractive life you can imagine for you. And it's right there because he is Emmanuel. Not more Emmanuel on a Monday than on a Wednesday. Paul says to them confused philosophers in Acts 17. Imagine his audience. They are scholars of philosophy. They spend their time debating new angles on deity and humanity and life. And Paul says the God who created the heavens and the earth is not far from each one of us. And then he declares their innocence. We'll possibly go there tomorrow and the rest of the few days that we are together. But Father, I want to thank you for this moment. I thank you that you bring us into a sacred place of understanding that you loved us first. Of understanding that it's not our brief history on planet Earth that introduces us to you, but you've always known us. You've known us before you formed us in our mother's womb, so that we may now know with unveiled faces, even as we have always been known. So we just allow your embrace to become our reference today, tomorrow, and for eternity. We don't have to postpone, delay for another moment, because the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. We thank you, Father.
Thank you for listening to this life-transforming message. Our hope is to release you into a fulfilled life in Christ. Visit our website, doxadeolondon.com, for more empowering sermons.